Benjamin, you have the floor.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Nitin, and thank you, Georgia, for setting the scene so nicely in this first session. Yesterday, if you were here, we had a joint session with the Urban Transitions Mission from the Innovate for Cities side, where we dived a little bit into the ways in which we could be tackling these issues together through the research clusters. All of this very much complements that work, and we're here today to talk about the data that cities need, especially using advanced data and AI to get to that place. My name is Ben Hanse. I'm head of research and innovation with the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. We're the largest global alliance for city climate leadership, with now more than 13,000 cities and local governments committing to climate and sustainability action, and across more than 1 billion people, or 1 in every 8 people on the planet right now, are part or live in a city or a local government that is committed to the Global Covenant. That speaks volumes because we still have so many gaps that need to be filled across all of these cities. Many of them have the ambition, they have the political commitment and the will, but very few have the capacity, the data, the tools that they need to be able to progress towards taking evidence-based action. And we don't only want disclosure, reporting, data collection for the sake of those 3 things on their own. We need all of those things to support and drive action. I will invite our panelists to come up onto the seats here. But before we actually dive into the panel discussion, I want to invite a dear, hopefully I can now say friend and colleague, the mayor of Despeñaderos, Mayor Carolina Basualdo, to deliver some opening remarks and share with us the city perspective. It's better to hear it from her than from me. I'm very boring about this, and I'm not a mayor at all. But she knows exactly what the struggles are, what the challenges are, and will be great to hear from you. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Buenos días a todos, voy a hablar en español. Hola, hola. Hola, hola. Perfecto. Buenos días a todos. Bueno, voy a hablar en español. Mi ciudad, soy alcaldesa de Despeñaderos, una ciudad pequeña de la provincia de Córdoba, en el corazón de la República Argentina. Soy parte del Board Mundial por América Latina, representando a otras ciudades de esta querida América Latina por el GCOM, este Pacto Global de Alcaldes por el Clima y la Energía.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, I'm Carolina Basualdo. I'm mayor of Despeñaderos in Argentina, and I'm part of the global board of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy.
Basándonos en los objetivos y las acciones actuales, las ciudades del GCOM podrían reducir colectivamente las emisiones globales en 5,6 gigatoneladas de dióxido de carbono anuales, el equivalente en el 2050 en comparación con las trayectorias actuales, sin introducir nuevos cambios.
Collectively, GCOM cities can reduce global emissions by 5.6 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent compared to the trajectories without any changes by 2050.
En el 2023, GCOM registró un 40% de incremento de planes de acción local de las ciudades, 9.100 ciudades con su plan de acción climática.
In 2023, GCOM had a 40% increase in climate action plannings, with more than 9,000 cities having one climate action plan.
Y el número de evaluaciones de adaptación que tomó el GCOM es más del 150% en comparación con el año pasado. Y también es importante destacar que las ciudades y gobiernos locales informaron más de 18.000 amenazas como parte de evaluación de riesgos y vulnerabilidad.
GCOM cities registered a 150% increase in risk and vulnerabilities assessments, and cities on GCOM had identified 18,000 risks and vulnerabilities on their cities.
Los gobiernos locales nos enfrentamos a numerosos desafíos en lo cotidiano para el desarrollo de las ciudades, para atender a las realidades socioeconómicas de nuestros países, sobre todo en América Latina, pero el clima y la sustentabilidad son un eje principal.
Cities face a myriad of challenges, socioeconomical and of different types, but climate challenges are a key driver for local action, specifically in Latin America and Global South.
Según un estudio que ha registrado el GCOM, entre las ciudades que han realizado su informe GEI y su plan de acción local, menos del 25% puede hacer un seguimiento de sus proyectos.
By research of GCOM, by research of GCOM, 25% of those cities that had a climate action plan were able to continue and move into action of those plans.
Esta investigación de GCOM también sugiere que los gobiernos locales que utilizan herramientas en cualquiera de sus etapas tienen un 2,5% de probabilidades de avanzar en estas etapas y escalar en su proyección.
Local governments and cities that have a climate action plan have 2.5 times more chances of moving forward in their climate action journey and moving into action.
Esto para nosotros, para Despeñaderos, para todas las ciudades de América Latina es muy importante porque a pesar de tener una capacidad limitada para trabajar, la acción climática no es menos importante.
This is really important for cities as Despeñaderos and many cities in Argentina and Latin America because even not having a lot of resources, this is key to moving climate action forward.
Creemos en una transición justa que incluya a las mujeres, a los grupos vulnerables y que tenemos que trabajar de manera coordinada en los datos, en las herramientas que apoyen en su bienestar y un camino hacia una transición justa, incluyendo a los sectores vulnerables.
We believe in a just transition that includes women, children, and other vulnerable populations, and data and tools are key to support this journey.
Y algo que es muy importante, tenemos que avanzar hacia herramientas con datos que sean transparentes, responsables y que nos permiten orientar la acción hacia el cambio climático.
An important thing, we need to move to responsible and transparent data and tools that support this action journey of cities and can make this transformation for them.
Para avanzar en esto y para hacerlo realidad en las 12.800 ciudades que son parte del GCOM, de este Pacto Global de Alcaldes por el Clima y la Energía, nos necesitamos a todos ustedes para trabajar de manera conjunta.
We need you all to work together to support these more than 12,800 cities that are part of the Global Covenant of Mayors working on climate action.
Tenemos que impulsar avances en la forma en que los datos se ponen a disposición de las ciudades.
We need to improve the way in which data sets are made available for cities worldwide.
Tenemos que utilizar datos que sirvan a nuestras comunidades, especialmente a los sectores más vulnerables, frente al riesgo climático, para que ese riesgo climático no se traduzca en profundización de las desigualdades sociales.
We have to support cities, particularly those working with vulnerable populations, to work and mitigate and adapt for risks, particularly those that may affect the most vulnerable people.
Debemos asegurarnos que las ciudades, principalmente las medianas y las pequeñas, puedan emprender la acción climática tomando la decisión con datos transparentes y responsables.
We need to support particularly the small and medium-sized cities to start the climate action journey with data that is transparent and made available for them in order to kick off this transformation.
En respuesta a estas necesidades, estamos lanzando un informe que responde a las recomendaciones sobre los compromisos de Net Zero del grupo de expertos de alto nivel del Secretario General de Naciones Unidas, llamado Integrity Matter for City, States and Region. Este trabajo ha sido elaborado por un grupo de expertos que hemos convocado junto a WRI.
We have launched a report on cities, states and regions tackling the recommendations of the HLEG on integrity matters. This was prepared by a technical group convened by GCOM and WRI.
Es muy importante la colaboración con organizaciones de todo el aspecto de datos y herramientas, incluidos los colegas que nos acompañan aquí de OpenHeart, para encontrar soluciones ante los posibles y para el mayor número de personas tener datos transparentes y responsables.
We need to foster collaboration with all the colleagues here on the floor, particularly Open Earth Foundation. We are already working collaboratively to find solutions and make data sets and tools available for cities.
Nos complace anunciar que estamos iniciando un programa piloto de estas herramientas, el portal de datos para las ciudades, con 25 ciudades de Brasil, Filipinas, Estados Unidos, Dinamarca, India. Esperamos próximamente América Latina para probar la incorporación de nuevas fuentes de datos y funcionalidades.
We have launched a pilot test of Data Portal for Cities, a tool made available by GCOM. We are working now with 25 cities in 5 countries, the Philippines, the US, India, Denmark, and in Brazil, sorry. So this pilot is already in place and it's going to test the usability of the tool for these countries.
Creo que el desafío de las ciudades es tener estos datos, trabajar de manera coordinada, tomar el informe y hacer alianzas como con OpenHeart para poder avanzar de manera más rápida y accionar frente al cambio climático. Muchas gracias.
It is key to move forward with collaboration, as we are doing with different organizations, to make this data available and to data and tools available for all cities that are embarking on the climate action journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias, Alcaldesa Basualdo. It really is fantastic to hear the city perspective delivered by yourself, and your leadership on the board of the Global Covenant is very much appreciated. I'd like to move into our panel discussion now and just invite all our panelists to join. First, we have Angel Su, Assistant Professor of Public Policy and the Environment at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Dr. Lenio Mirivili, Global Chief Heat Officer for UN Habitat and Arched Rock Resilience Center. And of course, Martin Weinstein, who is Executive Director of Open Earth Foundation. A big fan of this panel. I look up to everyone who's to my left at the moment as some of the best experts in the space, and some of the leading doers as well, backing up a lot of the thinking that they put out into the world. This session's about advanced data and AI and how we can help cities move forward along their climate action journeys at speed and scale. And we just heard from Mayor Basualdo, I think, several key asks. A, making data available. B, transforming the way in which we have data and put into the hands of cities and how they work together. And then C, the partnerships as well that are needed to help make that happen. I'm going to go a little bit out of order here and just sort of almost popcorn it if my panelists don't mind. I'll start with you, Lenio. As in the role of being Global Chief Heat Officer, it's an incredibly, first of all, amazing title to have. That's very
no pressure, right?
Yeah.
No pressure.
But beyond that, I think with great titles come great responsibility. So in this context of being Global Chief Heat Officer, what are you seeing as some of the key needs that cities are facing from your perspective, whether that's back with Athens or elsewhere globally? And how do you think data can support that work?
Thanks, Ben. It's great to be here. Dear panelists and audience, I would like to start by reminding everybody why heat. So this summer, the summer of 2023 broke incredible records, right? We had the hottest day ever recorded in July. We had the hottest surface of the oceans ever recorded this summer. We had the hottest summer for the Northern Hemisphere ever recorded. September was the hottest month. 2023 is going to be the hottest year ever recorded. And something that we forget is just a couple of weeks ago, we actually broke the limit of 2 degrees Celsius. We went above 2 degrees Celsius from the pre-industrial era for the global temperature. And this means that historically, since humans have started living in in settlements, they have not, we know that they have not been dealing with the kind of temperature that we have today. So heat is, we are increasingly learning that is the deadliest of all extreme weather phenomena that are linked to climate change. And for example, the summer of 22, we had 61,000 people in Europe. Over 61,000 people died in 2 months, and those deaths were linked to extreme heat. And this is in a continent where we have a lot of data, and we also have the capacity of supporting people. It's just to give you an indication of the kind of problems that we are dealing with and we will be dealing with as far as mortality and morbidity is concerned in relation to heat. And the other thing is that heat actually has this capacity of kind of going through the city and figuring out who are the most vulnerable, who are like the weakest people, and attacking them. The people that are socioeconomically most vulnerable, first and foremost, people with the lowest paying jobs, people with the worst type of housing, people that are children that cannot, women that are pregnant, older people, etc., etc. It's like really, and the people with pre-existing conditions, health, mental health, all of these are really kind of who are the vulnerable. Data is extremely important for figuring out where we have to put our efforts and how we can prioritize to save populations, save our most vulnerable populations, and it's doable. It's not something that is enormous and it's extremely difficult. It's more difficult to actually make our cities less of hot traps, heat traps, because the way we've built our cities actually kind of traps heat. So, but definitely, even at this point where our cities are, we can definitely prioritize, if we have the right kind of data, prioritize where to kind of put our initiatives and how to make sure that the most vulnerable population knows the kind of risk that they are facing. And this is something that we still don't have in hand, like early warning systems for all, which is a big issue, one of the priorities for the UN. The last couple of years is something that is very much based on data. We have like several UN agencies working together for that. We need as cities to have clearly and granular mortality data, morbidity data, what kind of working conditions our labor forces are dealing with, and also what kind of solutions we can have. And this is the beauty of AI and of advanced data, which is that if we pose the right kind of questions and feed with the right kind of data, we can actually have the types of solutions that we need to best help in collaboration with the communities to best actually help the people that are the ones that are at risk. So I'm going to stop here because we're going to come back. So this is the introduction, right?
Yeah, indeed. Oh, that's right. And hopefully folks can hear me okay.
Yeah.
Great. And I think this is a great perspective to have in the context of resilience and the need for data, especially geospatial, where it can be quite helpful to fill those gaps and help cities take action. We're seeing in many of the cities across the Global Covenant, mitigation is no longer the first entry point. It is, in fact, resilience and adaptation. And so there's a key opportunity to really support the way in which cities have access to data that allows them to be more resilient going forward. I want to move next to Martin on the far left, or my far left at least, Executive Director of Open Earth Foundation. Martin, we've been working together for a little while now, and obviously your team, fabulous at coming up with new solutions, new tools at a pace that I don't think personally I've ever seen in our space. But want to just dig into that a little bit more. Can you share a bit about what OEF is doing to help fill these gaps in advanced data and AI, and where you see a key opportunity for us as a space united to move forward?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and also having participated in the journey of the UN Climate Global Innovation Hub, which fundamentally also focuses on place-based interventions in cities around core human needs, and with so many distinguished colleagues. You know, I have to give first credit to my colleague and friend Angel Xu here, because I started looking at the carbon budget and the importance about data and blockchain on carbon budget, and she introduced me to the role of non-state actors and the importance around data for stock taking, and I've been in that wormhole since.
Sorry,
But-
not sorry.
But it's so important because it converges into this COP, right? This is the first global stocktake of the Paris Agreement, and so we realize how much the robust data is important to bring trust and accountability, not just to progress on NDCs, which were the key things about what the stocktake is about, but also cities and companies. And it was around May this year before we put out a platform called Open Climate that compiles all the pledge and the greenhouse gas data of, I think, one of the largest databases because it has countries and cities all together in a nested way where corporates are inside cities, cities inside regions, and regions inside countries. And we saw the biggest gap on greenhouse gas data coming from cities. It surprised me. It probably didn't surprise Angel because she follows the space so closely. But when we started researching, why is this? Lack of capacity, lack of tools, lack of knowing where the data comes from. Cities have to ask for the data locally. But then there's another aspect which I think is key, which is the motivation. Like, why would I put together my greenhouse gas inventory? And that's one of the key challenges that we have now is we're trying to push this forward because trust, accountability, transparency, these are very important words for us. But when you're dealing with the reality of being in the front line of climate change as a city, you have to first meet your needs. And actually, we've learned so much about how adaptation is really, as you were saying, Ben, so critical because it's really what kind of almost tarnishes the profile of a mayor throughout their campaign if they're not able to respond in time. But then the other aspect, which is important, is finance. So I'm leading this to say that we realize that greenhouse gas inventory is needed to support cities in building better planning and have access to finance. Finance that is outside their budget, because when they look at their budget and they look at what they have to do, it's overwhelming because it's like you have to be able to think in abundance mindset and also support private sector capital mobilization. So what we did since May till now is build a platform called City Catalyst. And it takes a lot of the existing data sets from satellites. We take images of Earth every day, every meter, and that allows computer vision and machine learning to derive a lot of insights. And for a city to be able to access all that information, it solves a lot of their problems. So Climate Trace, Google EIE uses cell phone data. There's multiple different databases out there. We integrate them all. And then I'm not going to go into it. Maybe we can do it later. I can talk a little bit about where AI comes in and our view for why all this is important for Global South. But so we really try to think about what are the tools that are for city governments to use to have access to democratized data that really helps their need. And like, I need to increase my budget for mitigation, decarbonization. In the case of Global South, that cannot be divided from social and economic empowerment. That has to be part of the equation. And it also has to integrate with a holistic plan that involves adaptation.
Thanks so much, Martin. And yeah, couldn't have said it better. I think that kind of marries the two together quite well. And I do want to make a few minutes possible for you to dive a little bit more into City Catalyst, because I think it's a tool that folks here in the room and elsewhere, also online, would be really keen to hear about. Angel, I want to turn to you, and I have to admit fully, I really want to give you a hug right now because we've not met in person before, and finally we're meeting in person. Angel, you do incredible work with the Data-Driven EnviroLab and are at the forefront of a lot of this research, a lot of the also turning that into practice for a lot of the city's practitioners on the ground. I should also say, for full transparency, you've been part of the working group, the expert group that's helped put together the report that Mayor Basualdo referenced, Integrity Matters for Cities, States, and Regions, which is putting together these recommendations for credible, just, and fair net zero commitments for subnational governments. And I want to give a shout out to our colleague Michael Doust in the audience with World Resources Institute, who helped bring that together. Putting all that into one, curious to get your perspective on what we need now, how you think from the research perspective that can be boosted as well, how the practice could work together, and how we can fill this gap at city level.
Absolutely, and it's a pleasure to meet you too. I feel like we have been
Finally.
working together for years, and now the COP is bringing us together. So thank you for organizing this panel. I did prepare some slides. I don't know, JP, they can? Oh, awesome. So I want to talk about 3 opportunities. I kind of stuck to the prompt, which is how AI can provide more opportunities for data scaling. So I want to talk about 3 applications. One is exactly as Martine mentioned on the emissions side, helping cities bolster the ability to provide inventories and understand what their carbon footprints are. And then secondly, I want to talk about heat. So I'm actually so thrilled to meet you because we're also using machine learning to better identify heat stress and also populations that are the most vulnerable and affected within cities. And then lastly, I want to talk about the buzzword that I think everyone thinks of now when we talk about AI, which is large language models and chatbots. So if we take a look at this map, and oh no, none of the points are showing up. That's really unfortunate. Well, there were more than 13,000, or close to 13,000 data points. And these are cities that are pledging climate actions. They're participating in voluntary networks like GCOM, C40, ICLEI. They're making emissions reduction targets. They are looking to develop capacity building. They're implementing sector-specific solutions on transport and buildings and waste. But then if we go to the next slide, oh no, so it didn't show up at all. Okay, go to the previous slide. So then this was supposed to then morph into the number of cities that are actually reporting emissions inventories. And that's less than 10% of the total cities that are actually pledging and making commitments on very global platforms like GCOM. And most of the points are concentrated in Europe. So more than 94% of that data is actually coming from global north cities and those in Europe. So there's a huge challenge, and I know, Martine, you wanted to dive into the global south piece because I think that's absolutely critical. And so if we go to the next slide, exactly as Martine mentioned, and Ben, there's a huge opportunity for geospatial data, large-scale data sets that have been around actually for several decades. Satellites have been around for more than 60, 70 years, but we haven't leverage that data in the policy space, and particularly for cities, to measure performance on their climate mitigation goals. And so what we've done is we developed machine learning models combining inputs from GDP as measured by nighttime lights data, population you can also measure through nighttime lights, electricity intensity, you can look at air pollution as proxies for transport and mobile emissions. We can look at large emission sources like fossil fuels, power plants, and also measure those from space. And then combining all that data, we can use that to predict annual emissions of different cities. And so then that becomes infinitely more valuable instead of just one data point, like a baseline emissions inventory. You can start to look at the trend. Are emissions going down? Are they coming up? Are they flatlining? So if we go to the next slide, what we've done then, you can look on the, I think it's my left, that is just the GCOM cities within Europe. And we can then get a full picture of how many of them are actually on track to meet their emissions reduction targets. And that's about 60% of EU cities within the GCOM are actually on track. But we can use that same data and model to then expand, as you can see on the right, to all other administrative areas within Europe. And so that just shows some of the potential of AI to really scale data that we measure on a regular basis, as Martine said. And so we're now working to expand that model globally so that we can actually reach global south cities and cover. So that's the first application where I see a lot of potential. The second is on heat stress. So if we can go to the next slide, we're actually engaging citizens to help develop more high-resolution models of heat stress. Yes, because one of the challenges is that most cities, they have maybe a couple weather stations that are measuring air temperature and relative humidity within cities. And that doesn't get exactly, as you said, we need to get that granular data for mortality or morbidity, where vulnerable communities lie, what underlying comorbidities they may have that make them that much more vulnerable to heat stress. And we started a couple years ago using land surface temperature from satellites, and that's still pretty coarse, 10 kilometer spatial resolution, 1 kilometer at best. And even then we were measuring huge disparities, almost a full degree Celsius. Communities of color, black and brown communities, and communities living below poverty are exposed to higher levels of heat stress. But that's still, we found, not great, because you're talking about the satellite measuring the temperature at the ground, surface. So you need to get it at people height. So what we've done is we have calculated, or actually gathered, using citizens, a lot of my own students actually, send them out with handheld sensors, that's right. And then also the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA in the United States, in more than 80 cities now, they've partnered to implement these heat mapping campaigns. So installing mobile heat sensors on cars and on vehicles and engaging citizens to do this high resolution mapping. So we can then combine that data along with remote sensing data and other land cover data to develop much more fine resolution, 10 meters now, and then you can actually tie those in with that very specific health data to improve the model. So I think there's a lot of potential there to replicate this model. And then the third application, which I think people are most probably excited about, and we can go to the next slide, is on large language models. So I think the good news about ChatGPT and Bard is they really put a face to AI and machine learning. Is there not? Okay, yes. And so, but what we realize is that a lot of these large language models, they quickly hallucinate and they make up stuff. And particularly about climate change, where there's a lot of nuance, particularly in complicated terms like net zero. Like, what does that mean? And so we developed a chatbot called chatnetzero.ai to exactly try to demystify and to realize that a lot of the data that we're talking about that can help cities is not actually geospatial, it's not numeric, but it's actually in text, in policy documents, and strategy documents, being able to then learn from each other. How can we scale that through AI? And that's exactly what large language models and chatbots can do, can help us really accelerate the pace of learning and diffusion and understanding and identifying best practices and benchmarking. So if we go to the last slide, this is a question that we asked ChatGPT, ChatNetZero, and ChatClimate. Can you continue to use fossil fuels and pledge net zero credibly? Which is, I think, a very important money question for this COP. ChatGPT says yes. You can continue to use fossil fuels and pledge net zero credibly. Okay. And that's completely false if you ask a scientist and according to the IPCC. So ChatNetZero gives a very clear answer, no. Yes, exactly. And ChatClimate says no, but it also gives a lot of not as relevant or succinct information. So we see also a huge potential in these very specific, domain-trained chatbots to help facilitate learning so that you don't have to wade through all 3,000 pages of the IPCC report, or now we've collected more than 9,000 of these policy documents of what cities are doing. Imagine if we fed those into ChatNetZero, then you can ask, yeah, the potential is huge, because then you can say, well, if I have some friends here from Australia, if I'm in Melbourne, then I want to know what Sydney is doing and how have their policies changed? How do I benchmark? How do I stack up against what they're doing? So I think there's
I can think of someone that would benefit a lot from
Absolutely.
technology and results, yeah?
Yeah, and there's actually, I'm so glad you mentioned that. There's a great delegation of cities coming from Australia at the moment, including Melbourne. So,
yeah.
and you're working with them quite closely. Sticking with this for one more follow-up question, Angel. Of the three that you sort of mentioned now, what do you think is the closest for city level, like for practitioners to get their hands on and to use today, versus which ones might need a little bit more R&D to sort of get to that readiness point where someone in an environment department, or maybe it's not an environment department within a city or local government, can run with this, create an assessment, start to move towards recommendations for actions they need to take on climate?
And I think this is really where those partnerships that you mentioned are so critical with academia and with researchers. And so, I mean, as a scientist, I'm incredibly cautious about putting my horse on, or putting my bet on any of these horses, because I still think that there's a lot more of stress testing that needs to be done. And that's why we as researchers also need to partner with cities and with people like yourself who can say, wait, no, that's not quite right. And I think that's the basis for this Integrity Matters report, where the HLEG came out with these recommendations, and then GCOM and WRI stepped forward and said, well, wait a second, it's not quite right for the context of cities and what's most relevant. So I think it's the case for all of these examples. We need to develop it together to make it the most useful.
No, and to your point, absolutely, and to your point on sort of the knowledge piece and where you are feeling more confident to be able to put your name down behind something, I think in our Innovate for Cities initiative at the Global Covenant, I see my colleague Kathy here in the audience, and we sort of co-lead that together. There's a tremendous opportunity now in the knowledge space with the IPCC special report coming up on climate change in cities, sort of feed into that and make sure that there's a proper practitioner perspective that complements a lot of the academic piece. And I think it's professors like yourself, Angel, that are sort of leading the way and sort of being at the nexus of both of those. That interface is so clear. Lanyo, please feel free to continue.
I just wanted to say how important this is. Like some scientists or some kind of policymakers become translators and become the ones that are willing to engage on both these disciplines and both those languages, so that the type of data that policymakers and decision makers want, they can get, or the data can be translated in ways that are actually meaningful to them, so they can go out and say, this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it. Because often the type of data that we get from scientists don't really kind of are not workable for policymakers.
Exactly.
They can't use them. They can't persuade people that I need to do that because of that. It's vague. It's too long term. It's, you know, it has a different time scale, whatever. It's like, so it's really important, the type of work that you're doing, and I'm very glad. And I want to jump based on what you said to another example, which will bring AI again into the, like a good AI example about heat that I recently learned about, which is in New Delhi. And so there is this NGO that's called SEEDS that is taking data, satellite data, and they have managed to, for over 2 million houses, to actually have a QR code, basically, in a sense, for each house. And they get data about each house, what kind of temperatures, and with, I think they actually use, depending on their first mapping, sensors for humidity and heat together. So they can actually have extremely granular and specific data for each of the houses in New Delhi that measures, especially at nighttime, because it's nighttime that the temperatures are the dangerous temperatures where we lose people, and to measure when the specific house is an oven that might kill you. And so working together with governments, they are starting to do initiatives in particular houses. And you know, this is so important because financing often is really tight, right? So if I know that I can do this and that house, but I cannot do the other 10 that are around them because they are kind of okay. And they are, one of the first things that they're doing is they're using cool roofs, like white paint, which is cheap and easy to do. And they have managed to measure like up to 12 degrees lowering of temperatures underneath inside the homes by this very basic initiative. So like this is like, I think this is like one of the great AI applications, because the AI gives them the capacity to churn the data that they get so fast that they can actually, when they say there's a heat wave coming, they can actually tell which houses and actually message people and tell them like to move out. Like not to stay there, to go to, and you know, the government comes in, and this is the important thing, of course, that you have to work with the communities and the government so that they can be a collaboration there.
And I think
that
that's
actually can tell them where to go or what to do or how to protect themselves.
It's emblematic of the kinds of actions that can be taken based on data like this, right? And it should be said, it can go north or it can go south, the actions that you take given data like this. And again, you need a lot of that capacity on the practitioner side to be able to make those decisions in the right way. We're coming up to time on this panel. Yes, indeed. So last question, and Martin, I want to pose it to you. And this is a quite fitting segue, actually, because we've heard quite a few solutions from Angel, from Lanyo. Obviously, a lot of the work that you're doing now is trying to build this community of practice, but also bringing together all of the different data sets, tools that can help cities move forward in their journeys, but actually having them make the call as to which of those data sets or tools might be best fit for their circumstances. So just curious from you, just as we wrap this panel, what resonates, what doesn't, and what you think is key now to move this forward with next steps?
I mean, again, it's a very important year in AI, and we are, everyone that works in data and technology sees this as a very important opportunity. There is a very important conversation we have around the dangers of AI, and I don't want to underplay them at all. I'm a microbiologist, so I know how things exponentially replicate, and the rate of increase in AI technology this year alone has been huge. I want to put the perils of AI on the side. Like people like Angel and myself and that work on data deal with a lot of data comes in different flavors, so we have to like combine them all together, but they don't speak the same language, so you have to harmonize them. That is a lot of very manual work, and often why it's more costly than we think. So one of the most interesting applications that we see right now in AI is on the back end, when we ingest all these different data sets, how to put them all together in a way that really fits into what a city needs in terms of understanding their energy emissions, their transport emissions, following the greenhouse gas protocol for cities. It's fascinating to see how fast AI is able to solve that. The other aspect that that you mentioned, which is the city needs to be able to trust the data. So a very important aspect is when we have data sets from the coming in from satellite machine learning insights with the city's local data providers, which is also something where AI is sort of like helping them by saying, give me the file of the energy emissions to their own local provider. They just put it into City Catalyst, and we help them harmonize that with the AI help. But then we have to really make sure that they agree in some sense. And one of the things that working with GCOM and the group has been very powerful is data also has to be good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect sometimes. Like you can launch renewable energy projects and insulate your homes, do smart mobility projects without knowing the results that it will have without having to be perfect. So we really have to do the balance with the city around being good enough. And maybe the other point on AI is the capacity building, right? The chatbot that Angel showed is very powerful. We're trying to put the bot in front of the city practitioner that really understands their context, that is already fed into their data, and is helping them navigate step by step. And we're in early stage research for this, but it's important for the Global South, because when we talk about the Global South, either they have to hire an expensive consultant, but they don't have the in-house capacity. So we're really excited about how we give them an interface and a tool that's so user-friendly that a person in a city government in Latin America, for example, can really learn through the journey and actually build capacity in that process. So that's something that we're really looking forward to. Again, early days, but critical, because we got to democratize these technologies for cities. I could talk for hours around how in the supranational world or in the corporate world, there's a huge gap of how much technology is penetrating. And as I said at the beginning, it's when we saw the gap in cities that we said, we really have to focus here. We're a nonprofit, so we don't have to necessarily follow where the best market is. We have to follow where the most impact is. Yep. So it takes us building these tools.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Martin. So I know we've got about 15 minutes left in the session. I wasn't going to let everyone here get away with just sitting in their seats. We do have an interactive portion that I'd like to call up friends and colleagues Juan Pablo Astolfo and Luisa Durkin up to the stage to help lead. And I would encourage our panelists to stay in some of these breakout groups just to help catalyze the discussion, but also to listen in. And then we'll have a quick recap at the very end. And I do encourage questions to be asked in these breakout groups as well. Let's just give these guys a big round of applause. Thank you so much. JP, what are we going to be doing? Luisa.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you to the panelists. And we are now going to, as many times we just sit in these panels and listen, we now want to have an interactive bit. It's going to take around 10 minutes. Don't worry, don't be afraid. We're going to divide the audience maybe in two halves. One half is going to work with Luisa, and the other one with myself. We lost the deck. Yeah, thank you. And the prompt is really simple. We are working with data and cities, and we want to really reflect on, this is not the deck, sorry. We want to really reflect on what data cities are needing more urgently, and we're going to work with three themes. One is biodiversity. That's going to be working with Luisa, and the other one is health and nutrition, or the built environment and buildings that we can discuss on the other group, which of the two we want to tackle. So what's the data that cities more urgently need? What are the connections and collaborations that we need to build among sectors for that data to be unlocked? And, oh good, here we are. Great, I can read it now. Yeah, who do we need to engage with? And is there a role for digital twins and other emerging technologies to play a role in this? I don't know, Luisa, if you want to add something?
So yeah, I think it's great because we'll think about what data points we already have and what data points we need. So maybe if you're interested in shelter and nutrition and health on the left side of the room, right side, and biodiversity on the other side. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. take one topic. Yeah, let's go. Let's go with the topic. Hello, everybody. What do we want to?
Only one or two?
Yeah, we will make one.
Well,
Only
one.
one. Yeah.
So let's get a little bit closer.
We would rather go with nutrition and health or built environment and shelter. Any preferences? while we finish with the two breakout rooms, thank you very much for your participation. We want to thank UCIH for the possibility of having this panel. I think there were really interesting conversations going on. And we want also to invite you to an event that we have now from 2 to 5 p.m. this afternoon in the Terra Auditorium in the Green Zone. Please, if you want to continue the conversation on artificial intelligence, mitigation, resilience, please do join us. And if you want more information, please, you can talk to me or any of my colleagues. Thank you very much.
If the panelists could just join up here at the front for a quick photo, that would be fantastic. Also, Mayor Basualdo, please join us for the photo. Luisa, join us.